Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute radio show that airs every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. And today we're going to switch things up a little bit. We're not doing the standard Paul interviews someone or Paul does a solo show. We're doing a show with my wife and co-founder of Retake Our Democracy as co-host. And we're going to be talking with Rayellen Smith, a friend and leader of Indvisible. She's the president, actually, of Indvisible Albuquerque, which used to be Indvisible Nob Hill. We're going to talk about the different paths Retake and Indvisible have taken in forming and sustaining volunteer-based activism organizations, and how we work together and how we could work together in the future. Last week, I spoke with Miranda Viscoli, co-president of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, when we discussed the recent epidemic of mass shootings and how, while the mass shootings definitely grab the headlines and our hearts, it isn't mass shootings that contribute the most to our deaths and gun violence. It's homicides, suicides, and domestic violence. And each of those require very different kinds of strategies to prevent. We also spoke about the political reality in New Mexico and the US and the constraints those realities impose on the imagination and courage of legislators in DC and in the states. If you're interested in finding out more about that, the blog that Retake published on Wednesday morning goes into that in some depth. We'll get to Roxanne and Rayellen in just a minute, but first, a few short announcements. I want to start by acknowledging that we're conducting this show on stolen Tewa land, and I want to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. We could learn a good deal from them, and we really need to, and need to soon. Now that the primary is over, Retake will begin focusing on the 2023 legislative session with a Zoominar series focusing on key issues we hope will become bills we will be supporting and initiatives we will be opposing. We begin the series with our next huddle, July 13th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. for a discussion focused on gun violence prevention with last week's radio guest, Miranda Viscoli, and a student activist from Albuquerque as a part of a panel. Join our Zoom huddle to find out more about what might be possible in 2023 in relation to gun violence prevention. We're going to follow that up with a series of other huddle Zoominars focused on other issues, including public power, public banking, health security, paid legislature, and more. You'll be able to find information on each of those by going to our actions and events page. You just click on actions and events in the menu bar and then scroll through and you'll find out more information. For right now, we only have information up for the gun violence prevention Zoom on the 13th. The others are in the process of being organized.
And that's at retakeourdemocracy.org.
That's right, I forgot about that. Finally, I want to remind you that if you're driving around town and miss any of today's show and want to watch the full YouTube recording of this show and any prior interview, you can go to retakeourdemocracy.org and click on the right side of the page where it says Retake on the Radio. There's a button there and it'll take you to all the radio programs, the YouTube recordings of them in chronological order. So easy to find. You can binge watch if you want. Okay, let's dive in with Rayellen and Roxanne. Welcome, Rayellen. I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you wound up getting involved in advocacy generally and Indvisible specifically.
Well, first, let me just thank you both for inviting me to speak today. I've been the president of Indvisible Albuquerque since the fall of 2017. I'm a retired CPA from PricewaterhouseCoopers, but I got involved in the advocacy work when I went to the Women's March in January 2017, right after Trump was elected. I went to DC for that march. And aside from being crushed by the massive crowd that was there, it was quite energizing to me. And I came back to Albuquerque ready to do something. About that time, I had run across the little white paper that two former Obama staffers put together about advocacy. I read that, started an Indivisible group that later merged with what was in Indivisible Nob Hill, and I've been there ever since.
Okay, well, sounds like a similar path. Roxanne, you want to do the same thing? Tell us how you got here.
Sure. Well, you know, Paul and I moved to Santa Fe about 10 years ago, and we to semi-retire. And, you know, before that, I mean, I had personally never had much time for activism,
Nor I.
advocacy. I was a single mom most of my daughter's life. And so once we got here, we're like, oh, okay, now we have a little more time. And then Bernie Sanders decided to run for president. So we said, we're going to support that. We're going to start a Bernie Sanders campaign here in Santa Fe. It was basically covering most of northern New Mexico. So that really got us going. And we met a lot of people through that campaign. And of course, he was not elected, did not in the primary. We came home, we did go to the convention. We came home and said, what are we going to do now? So we started Retake the Roundhouse, and that was fairly successful in regaining power to the Democrats. And then actually before Trump was elected, we decided we would start Retake Our Democracy, because we just figured even if Hillary was president, even if a Democrat was president, there would be work to do, because democracy was, you know, under peril, not to the degree that it is now. We never could have known how much, you know, we'd be in trouble in terms of democracy. But that's basically it. That's how we got going.
Yep. I would say that the thing that clued us as to there being a need for organizations like Indivisible and Retake, the first thing we did as Retake Our Democracy was hold a town hall at 1420 Cerrillos, the Center for Progress and Justice in Santa Fe. We were hoping if we got 100 people, that'd be an amazing turnout. There were 1,100 people, and people outside in the snow listening to speakers that were mounted outside so that people in the parking lot could hear it. It was just overwhelming. 500 people? I like it.
I say, wait, that's an exaggeration. This is the problem when you work with your spouse.
Folklore. It was 11,000 people. They had to close Cerrillos Street.
More people than live in Santa Fe.
I was going to say, was it more people on the mall than a certain inauguration? I don't know. Sorry, bad joke.
Yeah, there were a lot of people. That's
we knew
hundreds.
that we had our hands full, and so that was the beginning.
Yeah,
And
that like you said, Rayellen, you know, after Trump was elected, that really motivated you, and that's sort of the silver lining, I guess, for that his election motivated a lot of people to get involved. So that was a good thing.
sorry about the exaggeration there, folks. It's been known to happen. All right, well, we're gonna try and just kind of be a little less formal than normal shows where I just ask questions, people answer, and then we move on to the next question. We have general topic areas where we're going to banter back and forth a bit. So first for Rayellen, where do you feel it is best to put advocacy resources, national, state, or local levels? And why?
So for our Indivisible group in particular, we do all three, but we have a particular focus on local and state issues, because local issues impact my neighbors next door. I see them. I see how rules and laws impact them on a daily basis. I see what happens to their kids. It just becomes a lot more personal when it's a local issue, when you know someone who's been shot by police. So we focus on, I'd say, local and state first, but nationally, because we are an Indivisible group, we have a monthly meeting with each one of our members of Congress staff. So we meet monthly with Heinrich's staff, with Lujan's staff, with Teresa Ledger-Fernandez's staff, with Melanie Stansbury's staff. And we talk about the national issues that are going on and what we want to push for. And building those relationships has really been invaluable for them and us. And just a quick little example, one issue that we're working on is the National Infrastructure Bank, which we think is a really, really creative way to solve a whole lot of problems in our country. And we were able to get both Teresa Leger Fernandez and Melanie Stansbury to sign on as co-sponsors to that bill. Now we're working on Senator Heinrich to bring it up to the Senate, but we've got a little legwork to do there before we get that far, but that's our goal.
Okay, so how did Indivisible evolve to be looking at state and local issues? I know that when they first came out, like that handbook you were talking about, is really focused on how do you have an impact at the national level. And
so that's right, and that's a really interesting evolution. And I'll say that our group here in New Mexico, we're the largest Indivisible group in the state, but we made the decision that we wanted to do national issues, but we had to spend time on local and state issues, and we bubbled that up to our regional organizer. Some other chapters around the country were doing the same thing, bubbling that up to their regional organizer. And now National Indivisible has regional and state local issues training courses to train other groups and other chapters how to do local organizing and statewide organizing. So it kind of groundswelled up.
Yeah. Well, with Retake, I think we realized early on that because we aren't part of a national organization, we're just a local volunteer organization, that we weren't going to have much impact on a national level, especially while Trump was president. So we initially were focusing very locally in Santa Fe and northern New Mexico. And then as we started to meet more people and we became more involved in the Democratic Party statewide, Paul and I are on the state central committee and have been for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years almost.
16.
We started, focusing less locally and more just statewide. And that has been, I think, very effective for us, as we have started to connect with other organizations like Indivisible and all the different advocacy organizations, frontlines organizations that are doing work around the state for on the various issues.
So all three of us have now mentioned that we were involved with the Democratic Party. How is your experience? Why did you do that, Rayellen? You're this treasurer now. Why did you get that involved, and what has your experience been there?
So I guess about 3-4 years ago, before the pandemic started, it became clear to us at Indivisible, at least with our board, Indivisible Albuquerque, that we needed some more progressive voices at the leadership level at DPNM. So we made a strategic decision to get as many people on the SEC as we possibly could, to get progressive ward chairs and precinct chairs, and to get people in leadership positions with the party. So we started off by running for the SEC. Then the next round we ran for me and one other, Gary Coffin. We ran for Budget and Finance Committee. We were elected to that and served on that. Being a retired CPA, I saw some great opportunities for some leadership ability in the DPNM by running for treasurer. So I did that. In the meantime, we've expanded our SEC membership. I think we're up to 35 SEC members are also Indivisible members, and we have about 9 ward chairs in the city of Albuquerque. So we're working we just feel like our voice, our progressive voice, the issues that matter to us, if we work within the party, we can help bring about that change. And I honestly think it's working, because if you just read our platform, and 2 of our SEC members were on the Spark committee and helped drive those changes, our new DPNM platform is fabulous. I mean, it's just fabulous and full of progressive focus and ideas. So I would say the efforts are working, but of course, more work is always needed. So we'll keep at it.
If only we could hold our elected officials to that platform. And
yeah,
that's the issue.
I honestly think that's something we're starting to do, because when we have a lot of legislators come through our meetings, they want to meet our membership, and that is starting to be one of the common questions we ask us is, have you read it and how are you upholding it? So
Mhm.
if we all start doing that, maybe that'll start a little
I
tidal
gotta
wave.
say that from when we started, I remember our beginnings on the SCC was in the Deb Holland era when she was the chair. And for all her great work since then, she was just very autocratic, and it was really clear that the grassroots was not really invited to the party. And that has changed dramatically. I mean, you know, you feel welcome as part of the party. I remember I went to my first Spark committee meeting, and the chair then, different chair than now, just scowled at me like, why are you here? And they wouldn't take any of our input or anything. They said it's too late for input. And but
Mhm.
that has definitely changed. And
Yeah, it's changed in a lot of the wards here too in Santa Fe County, because it was very sort of like the same people had been in those wards and in charge of those wards for years and years and years. And I know, so when the Bernie crowd showed up in 2015, I think, they didn't, there were like hundreds and hundreds of people, and they just didn't even know what to do with everybody.
I had
So,
no idea.
yeah.
Yeah. So what do you see as the most important opportunities and challenges facing New Mexico? And how is Indivisible Albuquerque engaged on those issues?
So I think, like Retake, some of the things that we're focused on are environmental issues, particularly this hydrogen hub, frankly, nonsense. The merger with PNM and Avangrid, which we just submitted an amicus brief to the New Mexico Supreme Court, asking them to uphold the PRC's decision on that. Gun safety programs, certainly reproductive choice, paid legislature, health security, voting rights, police reform here in Albuquerque. We're still struggling with that. So we're still pushing for that at a local level, as well as trying to help do something and focus somehow on our homelessness issues, our unhoused issues. So I think those are the things that we'll be working on, and hopefully working quite closely with you guys on some of the bills, and working with specific legislators to help get those good bills around those issues written. Hopefully making sure there's not, there seem to always be a lot of loopholes in the bills once we even get them passed that make them,
Right.
like not enforceable, or, just difficult. So hoping we can do a little bit better there, and, focusing very closely with you to hit, because I know we align pretty closely on most things.
We do. And I would say that I'm sure Roxanne and I agree on the list of bills or issues you identified, but I would put one at the top, and that is modernizing the legislature, reforming it, expanding the amount of time they have to deliberate, getting paid staff, using technology. The interim committees, they're not using Zoom. In some cases, they're not even using webcasts. And if we've learned anything in this pandemic, it's the miracle of Zoom. I mean, it's been huge for Retake. We've suddenly become a statewide organization. We used to have meetings in Santa Fe, and we'd have 15, 20 people, the same people every week.
Well, and people, from every part of the state can participate.
Exactly.
Not in our meetings. Well, yes, in our meetings, but I mean in the, legislative hearings. And they don't have to drive for hours and show up and then find out that their bill got dropped from the agenda.
Right.
And it's just unacceptable that legislative council services can say we don't have the resources to do a Zoom. If Roxanne and I can master Zoom, I'm guessing the legislative council services could put their minds to it if they wanted to and make it work. And if they can't, then maybe we need legislation that not just authorizes, but requires that happen, and provide them with the resources, technical and financial, to make it possible. Because I think there's no retreat from this. They opened a Pandora's box with the Zoom engagement, and they had huge involvement of people from across the state, and we need to get back to that.
There's really no reason why they can't continue do it. It's hard to not imagine that maybe they say they're not going to do it because it makes it harder for people to participate. Yeah, it's a little more work, but they've got the technology. They've done it for the last couple of years. They can keep
They can
doing
do
it.
it.
It's much
I
more
could,
democratic that way.
I couldn't agree more. And, our Indivisible Albuquerque meetings, we hold them every week, and we do a hybrid model. They're in person and we Zoom them every single week. And we get people from all over the state, just like you, not as many, but we're working on it. Zooming in. I mean, it's important.
Yeah, and as important as the use of technology, it's like these legislators need to be paid and they need to be on the job year round. And so, because one of the things we have found is that big idea bills, the really important bills, whether it's the Health Security Act, whether it's public banking, whether it's public power, all of those bills take session after session after session to get through, because the legislature doesn't have the bandwidth to absorb that much information, that complexity, and commit itself to a path. They don't feel confident in it. And yet we don't have session after session after session to keep advocating in order to get some of these big ideas through.
Well, and for me, one of the biggest reasons why the legislature should be paid is so that it can really represent the people of New Mexico. Because right now you have to be retired, therefore you're a lot older than the average New Mexican, or independently wealthy, or an attorney, or a real estate person, or a business owner. You can't just be an average working person or mother. You can't. There's no way you can take time off for a month or two to do that without being paid.
Right.
It just we'll have a lot better representation if we can make that happen.
Gosh, we agree.
Absolutely.
So taking a little shift here, based on your experience over the past 5 or 6 years, this is for both of you, what do you feel is the most effective form of advocacy? Protests and marches, petitions, email and public comment during legislative hearings, direct communication with legislators long before sessions begin, all of the above? Where do you put your chips?
I'd say all of the above, with a specific, interesting focus on postcards. Our postcard campaigns seem to be working really well, getting people out to vote, explaining how to learn about the issues. That's a really, really important get out the vote method, and studies have shown they're more effective than a lot of other methods like telephone calls, and not as effective as door knocking, but definitely more effective than thousands and thousands of robocalls.
And you do handwritten postcards?
Yes. So we'll have a postcard with the issue printed up on it and the information. Then we handwrite a note, and then we'll take up collections to buy stamps, and then we mail them. We had one interesting experience down in Luna County. We mailed information on in Spanish and English on how to register to vote down to voters and down to just people in Luna County, all across the county. And the Democratic Party chair called me and thanked us and said that the Democratic registration went up by thousands of votes. Now there's barely thousands of votes down there, but it went up thousands of votes. So that's pretty good impact. And she attributes our postcard campaign to that. So I'll take that as a win, even though it's non-verifiable and non-auditable, but that's okay. But I also think getting known, just getting our group known by legislators, by allied groups and allied advocacy groups and things like that, that's something that's been really important, and that's taken us a long time to do. I mean, we started off basically as nobody, and but now we have the governor's office calls when she needs people to activate on issues. We have different candidates and legislators call when they need us to activate on issues, and we try to help as best we can, as long as it fits in our wheelhouse, and we've got the bandwidth to do it.
That's great. Well,
we'll want to talk to you a little bit about that postcard campaign, because that sounds like an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
For us, I think, or well, this is my personal opinion, and I think Paul agrees with me, that you know, personal relationships, of course, with your legislators. And that's why we really encourage people to develop a relationship with their House members and their Senate members, because that makes a huge difference. But within that is education. And I'm like a broken record, education, education, education for the public, you know, for voters, so they can understand the issues, because there's so much misinformation out there, you know, like on the hydrogen hub issue. And the average person doesn't know anything about that. You know, you hear something on the news or you hear something from somebody, you know, so education is essential. And we do research and we provide summaries on the issues, particularly around during the legislative session. But we're going to do more of that, you know, throughout the year, because some of these things, especially when you're educating the legislators, it takes some time to do that. And if they have a piece of paper in front of them as a hearing starts, I mean, it may be the only solid information they have on it, on an issue. And we realized some years ago when we started including these summaries, research summaries that we were doing, not just for advocates, but in the legislative packets, in the committee packets, they were reading them. And they were thanking us for them, because again, going back to, they don't have time to get educated on these issues. And often the only people that they are listening to are lobbyists for industry and Chamber of Commerce and all that. They're not getting the full picture of these issues. So I think education is really essential.
So I have more to say about this too, but we're almost out of time for our radio show.
Wow.
What we're going to do is we're going to close the show, give Rayellen an opportunity to share information about how you can get more information about Indivisible. And then we'll close the radio show, and Roxanne, Rayellen, and I'll stick around and we'll continue the conversation for the YouTube recording. But Rayellen, do you want to tell people how they can get more information about Indivisible Albuquerque?
Sure, thank you. So we have a website. It's indivisible-albuquerque.com. Don't forget the dash in the middle. We also have a Facebook page called Indivisible Albuquerque Events and Actions, and that's where you can see rallies, protests, other events that you may be interested in attending. Most importantly, we have meetings every Monday at O'Neill's on Central in Albuquerque at 5:30. And if you go to the website, you can find a list of speakers and you can get a Zoom link if you want to join. 5:30 every Monday at O'Neill's. We don't meet on holidays.
Wow, I didn't realize you were doing it every week. That's great.
For 5
Okay,
years,
well,
even 63 during the pandemic on Zoom.
we'll be back next week. I'm hoping to be pivoting to discuss the efficacy of guaranteed basic income with a state expert, but we're having a difficult time getting that scheduled. But we'll hopefully they'll be back. They'll be here next week. Whoever's here, it'll be a good show. So come see it. Come listen to us at 8:30 a.m. at KSFR 101.1 FM. And thank you for joining us. And please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess.
Recording in progress.
And by the miracle of YouTube, we're back. And we're with Rayellen Smith and Roxanne Barber. And I'm Paul Gibson. And I was just going to weigh in on something that Roxanne and Rayellen had been talking about, most effective aspects of advocacy. And I agree with both of them in some respects. I noted in the beginning of the show, Rayellen remarked that her involvement at a march in Washington, the Women's March, was inspiring and was a motivator for her to get more involved. I've always taken a view that marches and protests, maybe with the exception of some major ones like the Women's March, I wouldn't call them a waste of time, but I worry that people feel they went, they marched, they're done, and they've had their impact. And I'm not sure that the marches or the petitions that are often used are having any kind of impact, and might be diminishing the impact people could have because they feel like they've really already done something, they've done something.
Mhm.
And one of the questions I have for both of you is one of the things, and this is something Roxanne was alluding to, and I'm going to amplify a little bit on it, is the importance of communication, personal communication with legislators. And, Roxanne and I can develop relationships with, a dozen, maybe a few more than a dozen legislators. That takes a lot of time, and we aren't necessarily their constituent. And so Retake has tried to structure it so that we educate the people who subscribe to our materials and come to our meetings, and then have them reach out to their legislators. And that has had mixed success. I mean, especially in terms of trying to really organize it so we know, okay, someone is reaching out to Bill O'Neill, someone is reaching out to Patricia Roybal Caballera.
Yeah.
And it's like trying to get people to make the shift from being an informed voter to being an informed activist, and like taking responsibility for like, I'm going to do something and make something happen. How does Indvisible manage that process of cultivating that kind of growth?
So, we honestly, we take your blurbs that you guys write up, your summaries and one pagers. We use those a lot. We share those through our newsletter. And then we list out the legislator numbers to call for people that, we pretty much know where everybody lives. We don't have exact addresses, especially with the new redistricting. I'm sure our lists need a little updating. And then we talk about it at the meetings, and we say, you guys have the one pager from Retake. We need you to call. Who's going to call? And we make them raise their hand, and then we know that they're going to commit to doing that. So I know that probably 50 to 80% of the people that attend any particular meeting are going to make those calls to their legislators. They know it's effective, and thanks to the good work you do, and frankly saves us from having to do it, and we appreciate that. They're informed and they've got the information they need at their hand. So we activate our members that way, and I know that most of them are calling because they'll reach back out and say, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, so-and-so wants more information on this, some of which I've communicated to you guys, and we've gotten more information on this, that, or the other thing. So that's kind of how we do it.
Mhm. Yeah. And, one of the things that we noticed once we moved to New Mexico, we moved from California, which is a much bigger state, is how accessible our legislators really are. So, and I think a lot of people who move here from other places have no idea that you can call your legislator, write your legislator, meet with your legislator, and they will listen to you. You can develop a relationship with them, which just wasn't, not that we tried much in California because we were always working and busy, but you can make that happen here. But, the question that comes up for me is, we've got a big group of folks who follow us. You've got, I don't know, hundreds of people in the Albuquerque area. How do we get to like the average person out there who doesn't even think that if they do anything, it's going to matter, that's, because I remember Bernie Sanders said this along the way somewhere, that if you don't think that what you do is going to make a difference, then you're not going to be motivated to do anything. You have to believe that if you write a letter or make a phone call or knock on a door, that you're going to make some kind of a difference. So it's convincing people that they do have some power, and then really encouraging them and supporting them. But it would be nice if we got more people participating in democracy. And maybe, since democracy's in peril in this country, maybe that'll scare people into saying, oh, well, maybe I better do something. I don't know. But we do need more people.
I think that is difficult. That is hard. But the more people that we have doing the advocating, I have some family in from out of town, and I was telling them about the conference that we held back at the end of April, and that the governor was speaking, and that our representatives were both speaking, and our Secretary of State was speaking. And they're like, "How did you do that?" So we've been working on that for some years, and they're from Texas, and they feel like their state is completely inaccessible. Yeah, but I think the more that we educate people and talk about the successes that we do have, when we talk about the constitutional amendment for early childhood education, or we talk about free college or the other thing, people will start to see that, you know, those are actions that they can take too, and that they can get involved in too. I think we just have to keep talking about it.
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to add to that, I mean, one of the other obstacles I think is people have to have hope, you know, and it's really tough. I mean, 'cause you're not going to do anything if you don't have hope. I mean, and it's so tough these days to just feel discouraged, defeated in the face. I mean, especially with what's happening nationally and internationally, that having hope is difficult sometimes, but sitting around doing nothing. I mean, somebody said this, the remedy is action. So you actually can build hope within yourself by doing something.
Do you want to read the Solnit quote you were reading?
Oh, right. Yeah.
earlier?
So somebody had reposted this from Rebecca Solnit on Facebook the other day. So I kept it because I thought it was so good. It's about hope. It's from Hope in the Dark. I don't know whether that's a book or an article she wrote. Sorry, I should have looked that up. But this is her quote from Rebecca Solnit. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes, you alone or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists take the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. It's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact are not things you can know beforehand. You may not, in fact, know them afterward either, but they matter all the same. And history is full of people whose influence was the most powerful after they were gone. So that I thought was a really profound, and it made me think. Some years ago, Angela Davis was here speaking at the Lindsay Theater in Santa Fe. And one of the things she said that stuck with me more than anything else is that you're doing this now, activists, not necessarily, you're not going to get instant gratification. And sometimes we do, but you're doing it for the next generation or the generation after that. That's where the biggest impact is going to be. And I suppose if you look at some of the movements, the big social movements, that's probably true. So anyway, it's hard to cope with that when you're working really hard to try to make things happen, because you want to see them happen in your own lifetime, but not won't necessarily be the case.
Well, and also we've got climate change puts a pretty big kind of exclamation point and time limit on getting some important things done. And
Yep.
so it's a little frustrating to be making long-term plans or recognizing that might take 3 or 4 sessions to get public power passed in the legislature, when the people who are sitting around the table talking about it urgently understand that this needs to get done yesterday, not in 2 or 3 sessions. So wanted to ask you also, you just mentioned that you had the governor as your keynote speaker at your conference, which was excellent, by the way. I
Thank you.
particularly enjoyed the couple that closed the session.
We did
That
too.
was us.
That's a joke. But I'm just curious, where do you and Indivisible Albuquerque stand in relation to the governor? What is your view of the governor, and how are you approaching the new election, the November election?
You know, I would say we'll support the governor because the alternative is just not a tenable solution for New Mexico. And we're very proud of a lot of the good stuff she's done. As I mentioned, the early childhood education constitutional amendment. I know she didn't have anything to do with that, but that's a great thing that's happened during her term. The free college, tuition, a lot of those. Yeah, a lot of childcare, a lot of those things are just monumentally important to New Mexicans. And I'm really proud of her work there. But we do have some pretty serious disagreements with some of her policies, the ETA being one, because there's so many holes in it that are not enforceable and don't make sense. This hydrogen hub concept, why we would be pushing for that when the technology doesn't even work and all it does is burn more fossil fuels. Those are, I understand this bridge concept and what we're trying to do, but there's got to be some other ways to get there than continuing down the same old path that we're down. So I think, I know we'll all support her because we can't think of it any other way. But we need to keep pushing on. We need to keep pushing her. And we don't have as close a relationship as we would like with the governor's office. We have a little bit of access, and that's how we got her to the conference. But we're not meeting with her staff on a regular basis like we want, even though we try. But we do want to improve that because we think she needs to hear from us around the state, and all the indivisible groups around the state agree with that. We all need to push her a little harder on some of these things to get us all going in the right direction.
Yeah, we feel the same way. And just to make it perfectly clear to our listeners, Retake is also supporting the governor. I mean, there's just no way that we want Mark Ronchetti to be governor of the state.
I don't know if people saw the poll released Wednesday morning, but it shows a virtual deadlock between Ronchetti and Michelle.
Yeah,
she's 3 points ahead, but that's within the margin of error.
Right. I'm a little worried about it. And what I'm worried about is that we have a lot of progressives and independents, and is it decline to state? I don't know.
Right.
Yep.
Who are pissed at the governor for one reason or another. So like what happened with Hillary and Trump, they won't vote for her. And then they're going to get Ronchetti. And it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's like shooting yourself in the foot or cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? It just makes no sense.
We're hearing a lot of that too. It's like, well, I'm
Yeah.
so mad about hydrogen hub, I'm just not going to vote for her. And I'm like, no, bad plan.
Yeah, you thought that was bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
You want to
I
see a
think
well
maybe
in your backyard? Yeah. I'm sorry.
it would be worthwhile you and I having a conversation after the radio show is over and everything, and talk about strategy for getting to the governor, because maybe together we can get further. We've had zero success.
Well, because she knows we've criticized her.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Indivisible has criticized her too,
Yep.
and yet she spoke of you so glowingly as she left from the podium and walked out through the audience. She elbowed, we bumped elbows, but then she looked and saw who it was, and she just said, "Oh, you."
Well, but it was sort of good humored.
Yeah, it was with a smile. Yeah, I'd rather have access and conversation than getting arrested in an office again. But,
Yeah, no kidding.
So both Retake and Indivisible Albuquerque are 100% volunteer based. Does that make the work more difficult for you? And have you considered trying to develop the funding to hire staff?
It definitely does make the work. It's a good thing I retired, because when I was working, 50, 60 hours a week and traveling all over the United States every week, it was very unmanageable. It felt unmanageable. So we expanded our board, and we have a 9-member board, and everybody has certain responsibilities, and that makes us take a little easier, takes a little load off 1 or 2 or 3 people. We have talked about coming up with some fundraising plans to get some help. We have hired, technically we sort of kind of have a contractor who does all our tech and runs all of our runs our Zoom meetings and our hybrid meetings at O'Neill's. We pay him a little bit. And
Maybe you could
we've
lend
talked-
him to the legislature.
I know. I keep thinking, for what we pay Dominic, I'm sure the legislature could afford a little more. He's a film student at UNM, and this is one of his little side gigs, so it works out great for both of us. We have thought a lot about that and talked about that. Eventually, we want to get to where we can afford a lobbyist, or maybe educate ourselves to become one ourselves, which is sort of what we're doing anyway. But
Right.
So we're looking at that. I don't see that for the next 2 to 3 years, though.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Retake has just taken its first step, Roxanne.
Right. Well, we're a 501c4. Is Indvisible 501c4? Yeah. Okay.
Four. Yeah.
Yeah. Which means we're nonprofit, but we can't get foundation grants, tax deductible donations and that kind of stuff. So we just about a week ago, finally, I submitted our application to the IRS to become not to become, we're going to keep the 501c3, but we're applying 501c4, sorry. And we are applying to start a 501c3 because we have some foundations who have expressed interest in funding what we do, but they can't fund us unless we have a 501c3. So we're going to be waiting to hear about that. Because we don't have a very active board and they don't really have much responsibility, and that's probably something that we need to rethink. But
That's on us. I mean, we pretty much recruited people and told them we weren't looking for a lot of energy, just
just to meet 4 times a year.
Yeah. We were worried that we would wind up with I've had the experience of working in nonprofit world, and I've watched boards just come in and completely change what you're doing, fire people randomly, and or just get in the midst of trying to micromanage what you're trying to do, but not really doing any of the work. And so that experience colored my kind of desire to keep things less engaged if possible. And I think that was a mistake. I mean, I think especially with the people we have on our board, we could have expected more and gotten a lot more and benefited a good deal from it. So, live and learn.
So if we do our 501c3 is approved, that will actually be called Rethink Our Democracy, not Retake. And so it's a connected but separate organization. And then if we do get foundation grant funds, then we'll probably start hiring. I mean, we'll start with one person, figure out what we need the most, and then we would probably have a whole different board, to a more active board for that, I imagine.
Right.
You'd have to have
And,
you have to have a different board, just so you know. You have
Yes.
to have a different board.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, those are our plans. The only other question or topic I had was, it was obvious when we were down in Albuquerque a few months ago at O'Neill's when we gave a little talk there, that your group, although younger than Retake's, is still largely retired folks and largely white. And I'm wondering how much of an issue that is for you, and what you have either done to try to change that, or how you ensure that you get the perspective of other populations without them necessarily coming to O'Neill's all the time or being part of your board.
Yeah, that is something that we focus on very heavily, and we've not found the magic bullet to solve the issue. So what we try to do, first of all, we recognize our privilege and that we're mostly white, retired, maybe our income is a little higher than most New Mexicans. And that certainly makes me feel even more responsible to our community, that I need to give back more. So we do, we work closely with our list of allied groups, many of the same ones you guys work with. We work hard to make sure they know we're there as allies to support them, not do things for them or tell them how to do things, but there to do what they need us to do, and act in those ways. We've tried, we have a student membership policy. Students join for free, no annual dues. Our annual dues are pretty low anyway, but we forego them for students. We're building.
Our annual dues don't even exist.
Yeah, we would have no funding without them. So our $35 a year, plus if you want to give a little more, please do. That's how we operate. And it's not much. When we have a particular issue that requires funding, we do a more aggressive fundraising campaign around that issue. We needed to raise money for this. We need to raise money for that, and that works. But we have one member, advocacy member, who's assigned to reach out to other groups. The the New Mexico Black Voters Coalition. So that's pretty successful. We co-sponsored a candidate forum with them, a couple of those. So we're doing what we can, but we have not found the magic way to expand the diversity of our group, even though we desperately want those voices and we want to make sure we're hearing them.
I remember we had a meeting with a group of folks up here and talked about that, how we felt like we really needed to diversify the age-wise and ethnicity-wise, the people who are coming to our meetings. And in that conversation, I remember the sentiment was, you're not going to get communities of color or young people to come to a meeting, and when they walk in the door, there are all these older white people there. What you need to do is show up at their things.
Yep.
And become known there and contribute to their work on their terms.
And develop relationships.
And
Yep.
we have tried to do a bit of that. And we do that by working through our allies and so forth. But it has not
Same here.
resulted in a sudden boom in youth attending our Zooms.
Well, and I think, was it Mark Diaz Truman? He's an activist trainer who trained
us.
Yes, I'm trying to remember where he trained, like Harvard or
He
I don't
trained
know,
at
something.
Harvard under the guy who trained Cesar Chavez in organizing.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, and I don't think he's doing that anymore. He lives down in Albuquerque, but we met him sort of early on with Retake and did some trainings with him. And he said, just, you guys this is your group, these older white people, just activate those people and work with the people that, that show up. And then, develop relationships and allies and all that, but don't expect them, to come to your meetings. So, and don't worry about it, just activate the people you have. And so that's, that made us feel a little bit better. Not
We
that
still worry about it.
we still do.
Yeah, we do too. Same.
Well, thank you, Rayellen, for taking the time to do this. I think we'll let our listeners go and we'll go. And so thank you, folks, for listening and watching. Those of you who came over to the YouTube side, thank you for doing so, and we'll be back next week. And thank you, Rayellen.
Thanks, Rayellen.
Thank you for
Good to see
having
you.
me. Appreciate it. See you soon.